Alright, in this lesson we're going to go ahead and start talking about lights and the different types of lights Houdini has to offer us here. We have our mantra node. If we go back into our object view, we have our camera set up to where we want it. So let's look at these different types of lights. So we have some lights here that are more useful than others depending on what you're going to do. One of these lights that you'll use often is the point light. And if you come up here, I can go ahead and click a point light, and if I do that, I can kind of drag anywhere on my scene, and then I can just place a point light like that. Okay, and you can see right when I place a point light, when I zoom out, you can see that that point light then gets placed in my scene. We get the icon, and we see kind of some real-time lighting on our object thanks to our viewport here. And another thing to keep in mind, depending on your system hardware, your GPU, your graphics card, you might get some better features as far as seeing kind of a true-to-life lighting scenario inside of your viewport. If you have a lower spec GPU, you might not get all those features. So just depending on what you have. But you should still see a representation of that light in here. Okay. And when we lay down a point light, we have a point light node that's laid down here. Okay. And again, just like anything else, if we come up here, we have some parameters that we can play with. Okay. And notice just with camera and with point light or with any of our lights, everything's done at the object level. Okay. We never dive in and mess with any of the internals of these nodes. It's everything we do is up top here. Okay. So if we take a look, we have transform. Again, this is where this light exists in space. And if I want to move this around, same thing, I can come up to my little camera view, and below I have this look through light. Okay, and depending on the lights I have in my scene, I can pick a light and I can look through that light just like I'm looking through a camera, and I can come up here, lock it again, and I can move and adjust this light. So here you go. Now I'm kind of moving this in my scene, and I can place this kind of where I want to set this light. So again, a really handy way that I can go ahead and place lights. And again, I just want to unlock, and then I can move out, and we'll go ahead and see where that light is positioned in our viewport there. Okay. All right, so back to our light. If we go to our light, this is where most of our parameters exist. So we can enable or disable a light here. And again, if it's in candidate objects in our mantra node, if I disable it, it won't render. If I enable it, it will render. We can enable or disable it in the viewport, but this is only the viewport. So if I disable it, it'll still render if I have it inside of my candidate or forced objects. Okay. Of type of objects, a point, if I drop that down, I have some other light options here. I can set a specific color to my light. Okay, so if I wanted this green, you can see that reflects back on my viewport there as well. Okay, intensity, so that's the intensity of my light. And we have exposure. This kind of multiplies the intensity, so maybe I want to keep that at 1, but maybe I just want to kind of multiply that light intensity just a little bit. I can set that there as well. Okay. And down here we have some other options that is regarding spotlight, area light, some light stuff. And then if we go to shadow, the shadow types. Okay, so by default it's ray trace shadows. That's what we're going to keep it on. If we want no shadows, we can set it to that. Depth shadows, basically use a map to create a fake shadow almost. But we want to go ahead and create a kind of a real shadow, so we're going to keep it with that ray trace shadows. Shadow mask, we can put in objects, other pieces of geometry that maybe we don't want the shadow to show up on. Okay, so we can include that here, and then we have a shadow intensity and a shadow color. Okay, so those are our basic options for our point light. So let's go ahead and view inside of our camera. I'll keep that green light. That looks pretty nice. And I'm going to go ahead, and if we go back to output, I can go ahead with our mantra and let's go ahead and render to mplay. So you can see that warning goes away because we do have a light in the scene now. And it's going to go ahead, and in just a minute we'll get a render back. Okay, and the speed of this, again, it's affected by your system. So if you have a quicker system with better specs, obviously you'll get a better, quicker render back. So, and here you go, you can see a render, we can see that color, that light, that green light on here. Okay, so this is all well and good, and you know, it's nice that we can come here and render to mplay. That makes it nice, but it's kind of tedious. We always have to come back here and render and wait for that. So it'd be nice to be able to update stuff and be able to see that rendered in real time. And we can do that up top. If you look at our tabs, we have this render view tab. Okay, and if we click this, we have some options. Okay, so over here we have this drop down, the Mantra node that we want to render from. Okay, so our Mantra 1, that's the only one. And then we have our cameras that we can render from. So I usually select my specific camera. The ROP camera is the camera that's inside our Mantra node that we have in here. I usually just select the specific camera that I want to render. Okay. And these other options, we'll just leave the default for now. And then I can come back here and I can just hit render. Okay, and it'll go ahead, I'll say generating scene, and it'll go ahead and start our render up. Okay, so we'll get all of our features that we see in mplay. So there's our render. Okay, but the nice thing is this is now real time and it's updating. Okay, so I can go ahead in here and I can start making adjustments to my, say, my light. So if I come in here, maybe I want to put this back to a white light, and you can see that it goes ahead and it updates that. And if I start affecting my intensity, you can see that it's affecting that as well. Okay, and we always want to keep that going, but if we want, again, if we want to shut down this renderer, we can go ahead and shut that down and it'll shut the renderer down. Okay, so it's really nice. We can tweak a bunch of parameters, geometry, our lights, whatever we want to do, and it'll go ahead and update that here. So we're doing a really simple render here with the sphere, but if we had a complex scene, this could take a while to start up and then obviously render. Okay, and in that case, we have an option here where we can render just partial parts of our scene. So maybe, you know, if I just test out a piece of this, maybe I'm just testing out a shader or seeing how the light looks, I can hold shift and then I can drag, okay, to a certain part that I want to render, and you can see it automatically starts the renderer up, and I'm only going to render inside here. Okay, so this will be quicker as far as rendering goes. It'll render this really quick so it doesn't have to render our entire scene. Okay, so that makes it really nice. So you can see it only rendered that, and if I change my light color here, so if I go to this blue, you can see that it's only rendering this area to test it out. Okay, if I want to get rid of that, I can, again, outside of my kind of our render view here, so right in here, I can hold shift and click out of there again, and it'll go ahead and render our entire scene. Okay, so it makes it really nice when we need to go ahead and update and tweak some stuff and see that in real time, so we don't have to keep going back and forth and setting off renders. Another thing, a nice little feature before we wrap this video up, is we have the snapshot option. Okay, so I can save renders to compare in the scene. Okay, so say I render this, I can come down here, I can name this a different name, and then I can just click this camera option, and I saved this render temporarily. Okay, and then say I want to come up here, and I'm going to change this color to red now, and I get this red color, and then I'm going to snapshot that. So now I can come back and I can use this slider and I can compare my snapshots, and you can see I have this drop down. I can pick a snapshot, or I can just slide through this to kind of compare my renders to see what I have. Okay, and if I want to get rid of them, I can just click this little X and that'll get rid of one of those snapshots. Okay. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll look at a few more of these lights, and we will see you then.